Well, thank you very much, Frank, for that beautiful introduction, and thank you for coming this morning. For those of you who were here last evening, I thought, oh God, I feel so sorry. It was sort of you traveled all day and then you were sort of now transported into the cyborg world. It's true, I am merciless when it comes to, engaging the new. But this morning, I want to maybe ask the question, how big is our God? Many people ask me, how did you get to this place of sort of this cosmic vision, of God and an evolving Christianity? And I have to tell you that I did not start out this way. If you know anything about Byzantine Discalced Carmelite monasteries, which was my first stint, I was, you might say, to the right of Attila the Hun. They called me Attila the Nun. I was your most conservative, your postmodern reactionary. I had come out of the 70s as the revolutionary and went into the most traditional Carmelite monastery. Actually, I was inspired by Thomas Merton. I had never heard of him. I came across his biography, and I thought, that's what I want to do. I want to give up everything, go to the desert, live for Christ alone. And so I did give up this wonderful, burgeoning career in neuropharmacology and a postdoc at Hopkins, as my friend Frank said, and found myself in this Discalced monastery, which was like a greenhouse for God, truthfully. All we did was we prayed and we worked, and then we slept. And I knew one morning I was maybe on the wrong track when I found myself dribbling over my scapular because I was exhausted, because the only thing I ever really did to work was move a pen or a scalpel. So like hard work of moving in the garden, moving rocks and planting, and I thought, wow, Thomas Merton did not talk about this stuff in his books. I must have missed that chapter. So, here's the thing from a religious perspective. I was very judgmental of religious people. If a sister didn't wear a full habit, or, if it didn't follow the rubrics, I thought, that's not a real sister, that's not a real Catholic, that's not a real Christian. And I would, basically not talk to that person. That's how, narrow I was in my Christianity. And so once I flew the coop, so to speak, and wound up with the Franciscans, which were more fun, I have to say, because I wound up with German Franciscans, and they drank beer on Sundays, and I thought, this is really a good group. I like this group, So, but I was still very tied to the habit, tied to the horarium, tied to what the structure of a community is. And so I tried to fit God into my definition of what was Christian, or what was a sister, or what was Catholic. And then one day, now I have to just, in this little story, I will tell you, as I was in the monastery as a Carmelite, one day I was walking. I was outside, was one of the moments of free time, and I heard the words of the Benedictus. And it said to me, you, my child, shall be called the prophet of the Most High. And those words sort of touched me personally. And I went into the Mother Prioress and I said, Mother, these words have really spoken to me. She said, oh, yes, dear, that's nice. God is with you, that type of thing. I thought, thank you, Mother, that's great. So, but those words have stuck with me. That was number one. The second is when I left Carmel, I had to do the novitiate over as a Franciscan. I was on retreat, and I had a dream the first night of the retreat, and the dream was I was sitting next to a nun in a black veil, and across from me was the prioress of the monastery. It was Mother Maria, and she was saying, my name was Sister Teresa Leah. She said, we'd like Sister Teresa Leah to return to the monastery. And this nun in the black veil said, no, she can't. She has something to do in the world. And I knew the nun in the black veil to be Saint Teresa of Avila in my dream. And so these moments have been with me ever since. And one day, just to make a long story short, and this will get to the heart of the presentation, I was sitting in my little apartment in Washington, D.C., and I knew myself to be loved by God. And in that love, I felt myself really free. So I did not have to look a certain way or be a certain way, that it was in that love of God that I found a freedom to explore what it means to be a child of God. And that was actually something that Thomas Merton wrote about. He said at one point, it is not so much that we strive to love, it is knowing that we are loved. And I do think that love is the heart of life itself, which leads me to where I want to take us this morning in this exploration of things. Now, last evening we were talking about this losing of mind, this kind of dualism in certain ways with our technologies. And it's because we are not yet, you might say, unified with this cosmos, this place we call home. Nancy Abrams and her husband, Joel Pribham, wrote in their book, "There is a gaping hole in modern thinking. We have no meaningful sense of how we and our fellow humans fit into the big picture. Without a big picture, we are very small people." And I think that is a little bit of our challenge, how to find ourselves again in the big picture. Even as we ask questions on, the global crisis of world problems, that's still the level of the people, and we need to begin to explore the level of the cosmos. And, here is sort of something that has always been in the tradition, and yet it sort of dropped out with that split between science and religion and with the rise of modernity and modern science. And that is, cosmology has always been at the heart of theology. As Raymond Ponikar so wonderfully wrote, the very name God is a cosmological notion. God reveals God's self as I am, not just a being, but being itself. So as Ponikar says, there is no cosmos without God, and no God without cosmos. And yet, in our modern period, we have sort of inherited a God without cosmos, an acosmic God, which sort of makes me a little bit wondrous, like, who is the God that we are praying to? Who is the God of our lives? Because this God, the God who is the God of the cosmos, the whole order of things, the God of Genesis, the God who says, in the beginning, that God is quite at home in the realm of modern science. And so I want to just take a brief look at the world that we live in today, the world that was sort of disrupted in the early 20th century by a little Swiss patent officer by the name of Albert Einstein, who basically was unhappy with the Newtonian idea of absolute space and absolute time. And of course, Albert had a great imagination and was a wonderful mathematician. And you put mathematics and creativity and imagination together, and you have a new universe. And basically, Albert, there's a little story told in his biography how he came down to breakfast one morning, and he said, "Well, dear," he said, I think I have some good insights on, space and time that might really turn over Newton's world. And his wife, Elsa, said, "Well, that's good, El, do what you need to do." And he said, "Well, I need to go to my room for a week." That's what Albert did. He used to go to his room with his pajamas on and just stay there and play piano and think and write and, And then after a week, he came down with like this piece of paper, and he said, "Elsie," he said, "this is going to change everything we know about the universe." It was just mathematical equations. And she said, "That's lovely, dear. What do you want for breakfast?" So what Albert showed is that, we don't live in a universe of absolute space and absolute time. But all our religious language is absolutely framed in absolute space and absolute time. God is in time, outside time, we're here on earth temporally, we're going toward eternity. And yet, on the big picture, Albert said, nope, it's just space-time. And space-time is created in the beginning of the universe and continues to unfold. So space-time is in a sense, not fixed, it flows. And it can be reshaped or changed by the weight or gravity within it. So our universe is not like Legos. It's not like building blocks, you know. Our universe is more like Slinky or Gumby, you know, and this is just a two-dimensional view of the universe. But, you know, what scientists now realize from the 20th century is that this is a very, very, very old universe, you know. So I always say, if you're feeling old, just think of the universe. It's about 13.8 billion years old. That is very old. We can't get our heads around that, right? And the thing of deep time, I think last night we spoke of deep time. In other words, time, we keep measuring things in time. And sometimes I think the best thing we should do is get rid of all our clocks, you know?